can't even begin to explain just how insanely stacked this UFC fight night is. This is probably one of the most stacked fight nights in recent, like, for sure this year. It's even better than UFC Abu Dhabi's fight night by far. And also, we're coming off a week where we had one of the most stacked pay-per-views this year and possibly in the last 5 years. Just an absolute generational card at MSG, and now we got UFC Qatar. The UFC is always going crazy in the Middle East, and Qatar gets their very first fight night. You know, Qatar, a lot of money is where Qatar is at. A lot of money, but Dana White knows what he's doing, man. Making the business with the Saudis, Qatar, Abu Dhabi. Yeah, so we have a ridiculously stacked fight night, headlined by the return of two lightweights that we have not seen in a very long time. Arman Tsarukyan coming off his entire layoff after getting injured and having to pull out on a day's notice versus Islam Makhachev. A fight that we were really just robbed of, a fantastic fight. And Dan Hooker, who we have not seen since UFC 305 2 summers ago when he beat a close war with Mateusz Gamrot. And for Tsarukyan, we haven't seen him since UFC 300 versus Charles Oliveira. UFC 300 was like the 4th or 5th card I ever really watched in full and in live. So, yeah, haven't seen these two guys in a very, very long time. And they are fighting. And arguably, Arman Tsarukyan should be fighting for a title right now. He's number 2. The UFC is probably going to be giving either Paddy or Justin Gaethje to Topuria. But I'm sure they want to see, who's going to win this first. Which I could almost, newsflash. And I'm not even going to keep it to the end of this video to say it. But I truly believe that Arman Tsarukyan is just going to buzzsaw through Dan Hooker, just really destroy him. But before we really just get into the nuts and bolts, as they say, of that fight, we're going to start from the bottom. Okay? We're going to start from the bottom and cover this entire card because this card is just insanely stacked. Now, a lot of new guys on these prelims, which is why you don't see any of their pictures right now up here. Marek Boho versus Denzel Freeman, nothing really to say on that. Segid Izagbayev versus Nicholas Dalby. Now, Nicholas Dalby, whatever, entertaining fighter, put on a nice showing versus Randy Brown, but ultimately got put out by Randy Brown. It was really that KO that Randy Brown had on Nicholas Dalby that gave Randy Brown the main event versus Bonfim. And this other guy, if we look here, don't mind all these ads because we're on Tapology right now. Sagid 22-2. Okay, whatever, cool prelim fight. Nothing much more to say on that. You got another really hyped up prospect fighter in Shamrock, who nothing on his stats is up here, but he's from England. He's 12-2, I think. He's taking on another carbon copy Dagestani, typical Dagestan look. This guy looks like the most NPC Dagestani ever in Nurello Aliev. 10-0. How many fights does this guy even have in the UFC right now? He only has 2 fights. But, another carbon copy Dagestani. So, yeah, Nurello Aliev in the lightweight division. But this guy, don't be surprised if you see him in the elite of the lightweight division, in the top 8, top 5 maybe, in a few years from now. Okay? This guy might be coming up very soon. Okay? You never know with these Dagestani guys. Most of them are just too good with their wrestling, grappling, boring styles, and they'll continue to just ease out the decision wins and make it to the top. But, they display some finishing ability, whatever, man. I don't know much about these fighters, bro. But Shamrock, Nurello Aliev, I've been seeing online, people are making a big deal about this guy making his debut in Shamrock, so we'll see it. Ryan Loder versus Ismail Nardiev. Ismail Nardiev also coming off a win. Okay. Aleksandre Topuria versus Begzat Al-Makahan. Now, don't get it twisted, listen. Obviously, Aleksandre has the last name of the great Ilia Topuria, who is on top of this UFC world right now. Pound for pound number 1 fighter. well, he may not be anymore after this past weekend's performance. But Aleksandre Topuria, we can't have the same expectations that we have for Ilia Topuria. Aleksandre is a different type of fighter in his own right. You know, he's older. He started much later on in his what now is only his second UFC fight. He beat Cody Haddon, I think, in his first fight in Australia. So there's still a lot to see from Aleksandre Topuria. What truly are his ceiling and what are his limits. His striking and boxing from at least the first fight definitely ain't the same sharpness and technique. It's very similar for sure. Like, obviously, him and Topuria are brothers. They train together. They're very involved in each other's camps. He carries a lot of the resemblance of Ilia Topuria, but let's just not expect him to be on that same level right now. Okay? You know, he's in a very, like, crowded bantamweight division, and he's still just fighting these... But, you know, the UFC is trying to step him up a little bit because he carries that name. And people are going to pay attention, especially like me. You see the name Topuria, you're going to want to think that this guy's some kind of future star in the making, but we'll see, you know. I don't want to put any kind of expectations on Aleksandre Topuria. We still have more to see about him. Does he carry that same well-rounded game of Topuria where he could be boxing it, striking on the feet, going for finishes, literally becoming a finishing artist, and also holding his own with the grappling, wrestling, ground control, being able to get back up? We'll see another test like that with Begzat Almakhan from Kazakhstan. So, for the sake of it, though, I'm rocking with Aleksandre Topuria, but I'm not saying like it's a clear-cut choice. So, that's all I'm trying to say about Aleksandre Topuria, but he's on the prelims. Tagir Ulanbekov versus Kyoji Horiguchi. This fight was originally scheduled for Baku. Horiguchi was supposed to make his return to UFC. As you can see, a very old picture here from when he first fought in the UFC. Taking on Tagir Ulanbekov in the flyweight division, coming off, you know, another win. You know, he's fighting out of the... obviously, he's part of the Khabib camp, trains with Umar, Islam, that whole team. He's part of the lineage. He's part of the family. So, 17-2 out of Russia. Kyoji Horiguchi, 18-2 out of Japan. Gonna have to lean towards Tagir Ulanbekov until I really see it. Like, how are you gonna pick against Tagir Ulanbekov? Maybe the higher elite flyweights could put some business to Tagir, but right now, who knows how Kyoji Horiguchi is these days. I'm gonna go with Tagir Ulanbekov. Now, last two fights on the prelims, you got Abdul Rakhmahan versus Aliev versus Rafael Sakira. Rafael Sakira, you know, whatever. This guy's getting finished by everyone. Like, I don't know. Let's look at his record. Finished in 3 straight fights by Bukowskis, Ivo Aslan. This guy. Oh my gosh. This guy is funny. Okay. Now, let's get on to the next one. Luke Riley is basically like the next up-and-coming Paddy Pimblett out of England. Has the same hairstyle. Taking on Bogdan. And yeah, Luke Riley also, like, making his debut, kind of talked about. Like, he's like a Paddy... He's like the second version of Paddy Pimblett. That's what, like, his kind of fighter aesthetic is. And not much to expect from him. I don't know, you know? Like, we'll see. I don't really, you know, fighters that just haven't fought in the UFC, I'm not really watching, so I can't really give a good, knowledgeable, educated pick on this. But Luke Riley, you know, 11-0, he's undefeated versus Bogdan. You know, is this a situation where the prospect makes a flashy debut, or Bogdan will play a Charles Johnson and be the complete prospect killer? You know, something kind of like that. Asu Almabayev versus Alex Perez. Opening up the main card at UFC Qatar. 22-3 Asu Almabayev coming off a great bounce back win. He really dodged a competitive fight with Temirov, who he was supposed to fight in Abu Dhabi. Ended up getting Jose Ocha, I think. if that even is his name. I'm not sure if I'm getting the first name right. He beat him. That was coming after the loss where, honestly, Manel Kape was cheating. He was constantly poking him in the eyes. And then, like, TKO finished him. The ref didn't call anything. So Aliev ended up losing that fight versus Manel Kape. And he's taking on Alex Perez, coming off his loss to Steve Erceg, I believe. You know, Alex Perez has been a ranked flyweight for Lotto just a while. You know, just one of these in the middle of the ranking type of guys. He's been fighting a lot of the elite guys, though, in this division. Tough competition. Taira beat him. Can't say enough about Taira. He's an elite Japanese flyweight. He also lost to Mokaev, who was literally on pace to be one of the better like challengers at flyweight for Pantoja. And right before that, fought Pantoja, who is on the verge of really becoming probably the GOAT of the flyweight division. I know a lot of Demetrius Johnson fans don't want to hear that, but Pantoja's neck and neck almost with Johnson, and then Davison Figueiredo. So his strength of competition, when you look back, it has aged very well. But yeah, you know, he's fighting another tough fight in Asu Amabayev, who's seems like a well-rounded fighter, more strong on the ground. And yeah, I'm going to go with Asu Amabayev. Now, Shamil the Blob Gaziev. If you know, you know, right? Like, all the hardcore guys, not saying I'm a hardcore, but like, anyone who's hardcore in the UFC MMA space, YouTube, always has what to say of Shamil Gaziev. He's a fan favorite, 14-1. And, you know, he's a scary up-and-coming guy in this heavyweight division that needs it, you know. There's a lot of Shamil Gaziev lore that still needs to be discovered. And he's getting one of the most NPC heavyweights in the division in Sergey Spivak, though. Like, Spivak has been, like, close to the top and then just keeps being on a huge downfall. He loses to everyone. Of course, he lost to Tom Aspinall. He lost to Marcin Tybura, Cortez Acosta, Jalton Almeida, Cyril Khan. He beat Derek Lewis, though. Like, Sergey Spivak's just constantly fighting, but, like, just constantly losing to everyone. But, like, in a heavyweight division as bad as this one, they're going to keep this guy in contract for as long as they can. Like, normally with the kind of way that he's been having, number 7, by the way, he should just get released. Like, you really cut Rosenstrike over Spivak. Doesn't make, whatever. So, clearly going to go with Shamil Gaziev. Not much more to say on that. Shamil Gaziev, can't say enough about him, man. He's just fan favorite. Look at this guy. Future heavyweight champ in the making. Then, Tibek Orolbai versus Jack Hermanson. It's always an entertaining and violent fight when Orolbai steps in there. This guy is straight from, like, Mongolia. Really Kyrgyzstan, but this guy looks like straight out of the ancient times. He's just a different type of fighter. Crazy war with Mateusz Rembecki. He's taking on Jack Hermanson, who's coming off a bad KO loss to Gregory Rodriguez. And Orolbai, you know, he finished his last opponent in Musayev submission. Round 1, though. End of round 1. Crazy war with Rembecki. Almost won that fight. He's won his other 2 fights. So a lot more from Orolbai. He was having weight cut issues, though. So now he's doing this fight at welterweight. He was a lightweight. He's already missed weight a couple times. He better not miss weight here. You do not want to be in a situation like with Brian Battle, who keeps on missing weight, ruining fights, and then you end up having a great fighter cut from the UFC. But Orolbai, just sick fighter, constantly on these Middle Eastern cards, being a prelim. Could he be on that level one day? I don't know. It's hard to say, but he's just fun whenever he's in the mix. So, gonna go with Mikatek Orolbai to violently finish Jack Hermanson, or it goes to decision. But I'm going with Orolbai. Not gonna go against Orolbai right now. With Hermanson, heavyweight, Volkan Ozdemir versus Alonzo Menifield. Honestly, I'm gonna pick Volkan Ozdemir to hold his own here, defend his ranking. Alonzo Menifield's been a little bit on a good wind as of lately, but I think, already lost to Mirzakhanov, handed Sai his first loss, but I think Volkan Ozdemir is going to hold his own here. I think he's going to defend his ranking. Finally, we get into a crazy co-main and main event for a fight night in Belal Muhammad and Ian Garry. This is like a pay-per-view worthy fight night card. Belal Muhammad, of course, coming off the loss to JDM, a fight where he honestly, and I could give this to him, he did keep it competitive. He kept it exciting, not the boring smudge fest that he had versus Leon Edwards. But the difference was between Leon Edwards and Jack Della Maddalena. Jack Della Maddalena was able to get back up. He has a bigger frame, way better striker and boxer. And Jack Della Maddalena has been, one of the most elite fighters in this welterweight division. So Belal, yeah, I hate Belal. So I'm going to go with Ian Garry by pure just dancing and striking on Belal. But Ian Garry also has that ground game. He almost put out Shavkat Rakhmonov in the last round of that fight, and he held his own versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. So Ian Garry definitely has all the tools to hand Belal Muhammad his second loss, and I'm all for it. I always would love to see Belal Muhammad downfall. I'm not a fan of it at all, so. And I'm sure a lot of other people, Belal, yeah, he's definitely one of the most disrespected fighters in the UFC. I see these like Instagram reels of like just the amount of times he's been disrespected. It's mad funny. Ian Garry, has been such a gamer as of recently, just taking all these dangerous short notice fights, being that guy who's anytime, anywhere, any place. Almost beat Shavkat. Had ultimately a great masterclass versus Carlos Prates. Almost got finished in that last round, but beat Carlos Prates. Now he has a proper fight with the proper amount of notice to take on Belal Muhammad, who literally is coming off being a champion. And this is Ian Garry's chance to punch a ticket into the title shot. So Ian Garry versus Belal Muhammad. I'm leaning towards Ian Garry. And then you got Dan Hooker versus Arman Tsarukyan. Now, Arman Tsarukyan, and as I said at the beginning of this video, plain and simple, no need to go into deep explanation about it. I just think Arman Tsarukyan is way higher level of a fighter than Dan Hooker. I think Dan Hooker is more one-dimensional when it comes to like his skill set, when it comes to grappling and ground game. Arman Tsarukyan is levels above what Dan Hooker probably expects. Obviously this fight has the fuel and a great build up from just the animosity, the way Dan Hooker's been talking about Arman Tsarukyan, the back and forth they've had. But when it really comes down to it, and when I first heard about this fight, I'm just like, oh, whatever. It's kind of just, okay, Arman Tsarukyan needs to prove himself again. He's going to go in there and just really destroy Dan Hooker. I'll be very surprised if Dan Hooker makes out of it in 2 rounds. I think Arman Tsarukyan's going to finish Dan Hooker in 2 rounds. He'll probably start it off slow in the beginning, and then he'll get very violent with it, Tsarukyan. I think he's going to put Dan Hooker on the ground, cut him open with elbows, just keep him on the ground, keep him helpless. I don't think Dan Hooker's going to really have much of a way to get back up. He thinks he's going to be able to keep it with Tsarukyan on the feet, but Tsarukyan has held his own in striking before. Tsarukyan very back and forth with Charles Oliveira. He knocked out Beneil Dariush. He cut open violently and left Yoel Alvarez in a pool of blood, and that win ages better because Yoel Alvarez is still really good, up-and-coming lightweight. And then, of course, Tsarukyan was supposed to be the guy that could give possibly Islam Makhachev the most competitive fight at the lightweight division. And that fight ended up never happening. So we might never see that rematch again for Tsarukyan and Islam Makhachev. But Arman Tsarukyan, after this, there'll be no more excuses. He will be getting that next title shot versus Ilia Topuria. And if you were to ask some UFC fans, they said already that, despite, him messing up his chances of a shot, the UFC, of course, had to make a point. But maybe Tsarukyan could have still, fought Ilia for the title, because that would be the most intriguing, compelling fight for Ilia Topuria. I think Topuria is going to smoke through either Paddy or Gaethje. So that's really where I'm keeping it to. Dan Hooker, he's exciting. He's violent. He also, in his last fight, was supposed to be fighting Justin Gaethje. So he's actually supposed to fight in March. And then he got injured himself. So that delayed things. But I think that was a much more winnable matchup for him than Arman Tsarukyan. Dan Hooker, he has some classic wars. He's able to take a lot of damage. and he's definitely a very entertaining fighter. But in this situation, Tsarukyan, I think, is just going to run through Hooker. I think he's going to destroy him, and then there will be no more denying him for a title. He's going to just be next. So Tsarukyan to violently finish Dan Hooker within 2 rounds. That's what I'm going with. Now, yeah, that's my thoughts on UFC Qatar. 2 absolutely loaded and stacked weeks in the UFC to finish off as we almost close out the year. Crazy fight night. And yeah, I'll see you guys after this one.